Good morning. Can you state your name and your profession?
My name is Jason Wang. I'm a medical student at Texas Tech University in Paul Foster School of Medicine in El Paso, Texas. And I just finished up my second year, so I will be a third year medical student.
Wonderful. Can you tell me that why did you interest in the Vietnamese American history?
Well, it was an interesting story. I came into UT as an Asian American Studies major, and so that was what I was getting my degree in. And one of the first classes that I took that semester actually was Linda Ho Peche's Vietnamese American or Vietnamese in America class. And as part of that project, or as part of that class, she wanted us to try to help out with an oral histories project. And so actually that was one of my first exposures to on a wider scale of the Vietnamese American community. And then that compounded with being here at UT with such a huge Vietnamese student population with the VSA, it seemed like as part of that class, when I did my interview, I actually interviewed somebody very interesting. She was a nurse during the war, and she cared for a lot of people. And so I thought that her story was really cool. So I was like, hey, I really like this project, and it really speaks to me, people trying to help people. And that was something that I used I wanted to find out a little bit more because I thought it was such a great project.
So you got it by chance because you went to study Asian American Studies as your major. You have to take Vietnamese American culture and history as one of the requirements. Can you repeat that?
Yeah. So one of the classes, as part of my major for my degree, we just had to take a lot of different classes in Asian American Studies. And so I was very, very fortunate that Linda was teaching that class that semester. And it sounded interesting on paper, so I was like, why not? It was an upper division class, but they let me into her class, and I was very fortunate. It was a great experience for me, just learning. We started out learning about a little bit about Vietnamese culture, and then we finished the semester by interviewing somebody. And I think that as far as a liberal arts class goes, it definitely taught me a lot from that aspect. And when the semester ended, I felt like I wanted to know a little bit more, which I think is a mark of a great professor, inspiring their students. So as part of that, I was really interested, and then I asked Linda to tell me a little bit more about the project so I could hopefully try to get involved and see if I could help out. So I was a young student, and I had a lot of time and enthusiasm on my hands. So.
Can you tell me a little bit about the class? How many students that class had, and what were the student question asked the most in that class? What they interested about?
Well, I believe we had somewhere around mid-20s in our class, maybe 25 people, and some of the students were Asian American Studies, but a lot of the students were anthropology majors or other liberal arts majors, and many of them had not been exposed to Vietnamese culture at all. There were quite a few Vietnamese students too, so it was a pretty balanced class, and from that aspect, I think it was great. It was a great environment to foster learning about Vietnamese Americans, which ultimately I think the class was pretty successful. So we started out with just general history, and then we also studied a little bit of culture, and then we got to talk with some Vietnamese Americans, and just throughout that whole semester experience, that's kind of how Linda went about teaching the class. And I think the most important thing of learning is just knowing the history, because when you know the history of a people, I mean, that's one of the most important parts, because what we've done as people, that defines who we are. So that, just knowing the history, that was one of the most, that was one of the coolest things that I learned in college, was just learning about other people, and comparing that to, I guess, my own experiences, and seeing 50 years down the road, who do I want to be, and trying to pick up as much as I could in college. So.
What was the question that the student asked the most in that class, you remember?
I don't really remember. We had a mostly open table format, but most students were, I guess, just pretty interested about the history as well. So just reading the books, just finding out specifically, how, especially the youth as well, how Vietnamese American youth, how do they grow up in such a different society from what their parents have gone through, and how does that affect them as kids inside of such a new culture. So I think that was one of the most important questions that we tried to answer throughout the class.
Any question regarding to the discrepancy between the book and then the experience that the student themselves or their parent, grandparent went through?
So a lot of the books that we read, they were actually oral histories of a handful of people, and maybe students who had grown up in California, who were 1.5 generation, and a lot of the students at UT, like, we would try to compare the stories and see what was similar, what was different. And I think that was, going through the book, it definitely provided a good look at some of the stories. But we wanted to, also add more to the history. And the only way you can do that is by just talking with more people to make sure that nobody got left out, especially because everybody's story was so different, everybody's experiences. So a lot of what we read in the books, it was transferable. It was, you could see common themes. But of course, everybody's story was just so different that we tried our best to go out and find out what were the differences between everybody. So I think that was the most special part, was just figuring out who is, as an individual, who are these people.
So after the Vietnamese American, in your definition?
After taking that class, that semester I was also pretty involved in the VSA, the Vietnamese Student Association, and it gave me a much better understanding of some of the youth at UT, and I got to see how, as a community, a lot of the students, they stuck together and tried to help each other out, and I thought that the students themselves, they were very, it was a very community oriented. Everybody was trying to help out each other, especially since a lot of the students, they're all struggling. A lot of their parents were, their family did not have the financial capabilities to help them out. So out of all the students, we were just trying to, find our own place at UT and make Texas, make UT our home. So that was, in terms of the students, a lot of them just wanted to find out some more about the culture. So a lot of the cultural events that the VSA hosted, that was, just further exploring Vietnamese heritage. And it happens because the students, they turn over so quickly. I think that it's a good thing that it goes on every year. So, celebrate certain holidays, and ultimately, I think a lot of the students here, once they get into UT, they find out a lot more about their own culture, and for many of them, it makes them more in tune with finding out who they are and who they want to be as well.
Tell me about your involvement with the VAHF, the Vietnamese American Heritage Foundation.
After I finished taking Linda Ho Peche's class, the person I interviewed, I had to type up the interview transcript, and that was just talking with her was one of the most eye-opening experiences of my life. Just talking to a nurse who had been in a war zone. You don't see that in the U.S. very often. The U.S. is such a diverse place, but then many people, they come from hardship, and then they're often reluctant to talk about it. So I thought that interview was really cool. And I also looked at some of my other classmates' interviews, and it seemed like everybody that we had talked to they all had amazing stories. And so I read through some of their transcripts, and I thought that it was a very well thought out project. And I also thought that at that time, as a freshman at UT, I was looking to, try to get involved in something. And it was a project that I thought was very noble. And so I asked Linda to put me in touch with Nancy, and so she did that, and I ended up finding out a little bit more about the project, and I thought that at that time it was the student leaders on campus, they were pretty busy with doing their events and doing all sorts of stuff, and so I knew that I had a certain set of skills, and I could be pretty useful. So that's how I started with VHF, and then just tried to make the project as big as possible, because it's such a good project that it deserves the best that it can be. So
I remember your level of enthusiasm is so high, so you even make that into try to make it into the President Clinton project or something?
Yeah. That year, actually, the following spring, Bill Clinton, he was doing his Clinton Global Initiative here at UT, actually. And so I thought that was a good opportunity, because half of getting a good project completed is just letting people know that it exists. And so the more publicity, the better. So Bill Clinton was hosting his Clinton Global Initiative here at UT, and 2,000 students from all over the world flew in, and they were all involved in nonprofits, every single one of them. So hundreds and hundreds of nonprofits represented, all run by students, and a lot of great ideas floating around. And so it was really interesting, because we had submitted our proposal to the CGIU, and somebody had called me back within a week, 2 weeks later, and they were like, hey, we want you to be representing our panel for human rights. And so that was I thought that was very, very special, because it really showed the importance of the project. They had picked two nonprofits to represent each category, and so to be nominated for human rights work by Bill Clinton's his personal nonprofit, that was really something special. The other group was a group that was founded by a former child soldier in Africa, and so it really shows something about how much the project means to have taken such a special place, to be honored by the Clinton Global Initiative. And after that, throughout the whole conference, we had people coming up and telling us how great the project sounds, and how they would like to get involved, and how much we could do with that. And so that really, that was just one of the stepping stones. So, everybody knew that was a great project. You just need to have the right people there at the right time. And so when all of that works together, you get something pretty successful.
Wonderful. How many cities you go with the VHF, and how you find the time to do all that?
Well, that's a great question. So as a student, it was actually, I guess, pretty tough just finding the time. But at the same time, like, the project was a great project, and I've been, I guess, blessed myself to be able to, like, get through school, but I guess a little bit better than others. So from an academic standpoint, I knew that I could take care of myself, and at the same time, try to help out with the project as much as I could. So finding time, it's something that every student has to learn. But I think with that regards, it turned out pretty well. And so, I mean, many of the trips that we did were during the summer or during the winter break. And so I was able to participate in many of them. And so I think the first city that we went to was San Jose. And that was at that time it was still a really small project. And there were just the two of us in San Jose. But everybody there was so helpful. Everybody in San Jose was so helpful, and everybody wanted to help out the project because they all knew that it was such a great project. So with that much help, like, I didn't want to let anybody down. So if everybody else is putting in the work, and like, for me to do a little bit extra work, I thought that I could handle that. And so ultimately, it turned out over the span of 3 years that I was involved. We went to just all these different cities, and every city, everybody was very helpful. We went to San Jose, and then there was Washington, D.C., and we went to New Orleans and L.A., and also Houston, and here in Austin as well. And in every city, everybody was just so helpful, offering housing and helping to feed us. And so the food was very delicious. And so luckily, we, with the help of just a lot of different people, I think that was really what helped keep me involved, was just knowing that so many people cared for the project, and knowing that it was a really great thing that we're doing. So the right circumstances just happened to work out, and all of the students getting together with uNAVSA across all of the different states as well. It was just such a community experience that it had to be done. So.
What's the with the project that you still remember?
The happiest moment with the project, I think, was actually when we were going to New Orleans. That Sunday, I was driving to New Orleans. Or no, it was a Friday. So Friday morning, I was driving to New Orleans. And at that point, I didn't know if I had been accepted into medical school or not. So I had applied the previous fall, and I actually got a call on my way to New Orleans. And so it was the admissions officer for Paul Foster in El Paso, and he called me and told me that, hey, we've accepted you. And at that point, I was ecstatic. It was the greatest moment of my life, knowing that I could do everything without stretching myself too thin, and still be able to pursue my dreams of being able to help people. And so I think that moment, that was the greatest moment. And then, of course, it also had to do with the follow-up week, because everything that we did in New Orleans, the Vietnamese community there, they were They were just so they were so friendly and so open. They had just rebuilt from Katrina, and everybody was working so hard to get back on their feet and to just see the community work together, and at the same time just continue their living over there. It was truly a great experience, just seeing how people work together to help rebuild through such hardship, especially since many of them, they had already lost one home, and then they had to lose their home again, and yet they were able to bounce back and get all of their work done and then continue surviving as a community. So I thought that was one of the greatest moments that it really showed me something about the true spirit of, I guess, just hard work and working together. So.
You remember your medical school acceptance celebration in New Orleans. Remember a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, of course, New Orleans itself is such a great city. Just having Bourbon Street and all of the students. So that itself was of course very great. So I look forward to going back to New Orleans as soon as I can. So.
Remember what we ate?
Yeah, it was the food was the food was some of the best Vietnamese food that I've had. They had a way of putting Cajun influences into the Vietnamese food. And I thought that was, and it was just so fresh. Everything had just been caught that morning. And all of the food was so fresh, and the way that they cooked it with the Cajun influences, it was really different from Vietnamese food in many of the other cities. So I thought that was truly delicious. So.
You mean the crawfish? You forgot to mention.
Yeah.
You have to say it again.
Yeah, the crawfish. There was one night where our host took us out for crawfish, and it was just so fresh, and I won't forget that. So it was really great just having 20-30 pounds of crawfish just spread out on the table, and everybody's just having a lot of fun eating it. So that was really good.
Well, by working with the community to learn about their culture and history, do you think that will help you throughout your life, so you can be a better doctor, you can be a better person? Can you elaborate that?
Yeah, I mean, in medical school, most of the people that I see are actually, they come from I guess high socioeconomic status, very high socioeconomic status. And then also many of them are just biology majors or chemistry majors, and they come into medical school. And then I was actually the only Asian American Studies student that was accepted across all of Texas that year. So I think that's one of the reasons why.
Okay.
So I was actually the only Asian American Studies major medical student across all of Texas that was accepted that year. Interestingly enough, there was another Asian American Studies major who had graduated a year before me, and she had also taken Linda Peche's class, Vivian Mai Tran, and she's down at UT Houston Medical School. But for my year, I found that very interesting. That as far as humanities goes, we medical schools there, they don't have a lot of people who had majored in humanities, and so I think that looking at these past 2 years, it's been really interesting seeing how a lot of the biology majors and the science majors they interact with their patients. At the end of the day, I think that having learned about so many different cultures, it really helped me, I guess, keep my humanity inside of medicine. You hear that a lot of medical students, after they're in medical school for a while, they start becoming jaded, and they lose a little bit of that humanity, that willingness to go out and help people. The whole reason why they got into medical school, and then part of that is just the job itself, the extra stresses that come with it now. But I really think that with this project, it's really helped me get a really good sense of why I want to help people, and having that knowledge, knowing that I have that knowledge, has set me apart from the rest of my class. And I also know that in the future, it will be really helpful to me. I know that many doctors, they don't get involved in their communities, and yet they have so much respect. The few doctors who do get out there and help their communities, everybody loves them. Their job is to save people, and so that's something that I know that I want to continue on in the future, is working with communities. And right now inside of El Paso, where 80% of the city is Hispanic and everybody only speaks Spanish, so that's been a really interesting challenge to I guess deal with, learning how to live in such a radically different culture. But I really think that working with the Vietnamese community, it really helped me, I guess, keep an open mind. And that's something that I see in a lot of my classmates. They start shutting down, and it's really difficult for them to try to accept the new culture that they've been pushed in. I mean, El Paso, it might as well be in Mexico. Like, it's 600 miles from Austin, and the other side is LA, and that's 1,200 miles away. So, I mean, we might as well be in Mexico. Everybody there is Hispanic. The whole population is Hispanic. And all of the food is Hispanic, so it's definitely something really interesting that I was really, I guess, once I got into medical school, I appreciated it a lot more, having come from such a different background than a regular pre-med student who had spent 4 years in college as a biology major. I really felt that my experiences have helped me tremendously. And then to also, just remember to work hard and remember why I'm pushing through medical school. So, these days we've had students in medical school, I've seen them that, say they don't know why they're going through medical school anymore, because the job is so hard, the hours are so long, and they've lost sight of why they're doing all this work. But for 2 years, like I've suffered, and all of my other classmates have suffered, and everybody across the state of Texas, we're all suffering. But everybody finds their own reason to push through medical school, and I think that this project has really helped me remember why I wanted to do what I've wanted to do. I've always wanted to be a doctor since forever and ever, since I was 4 years old. My mom told me that I wanted to be a doctor, so this is something that I really hold this project special for being able to help me keep that part of my humanity.
Wonderful. On the other hand, was it a major in Asian American Studies in that program? How about the science courses? Was it you still have the same level with the people major in biology, or how's that go?
Well, pre-med is, as long as you take the classes, you can apply for medical school, take the classes and take the test. So I was very fortunate because I knocked out many of the science classes in high school, which, that had helped me. I only spent 2 years at UT, and then I finished at UT because of TAMS, that program. And so for pre-med, as long as you take the classes, you can apply. And so they have a lot of other people from finance backgrounds, some other liberal arts majors. In my class we have an organ studies major from Baylor, and he's pretty cool. I feel like most of the people who come from different backgrounds, they have the most to offer in terms of diversity, and that's the kind of strength that you want. That's the type of doctor you want, is somebody who has been around the block a couple of times, and they know something besides staring into a textbook all day. So that is just getting all of the science classes done for pre-med, and I guess for medical school itself, it did leave me at a disadvantage going in. A lot of the other students knew a lot more because they had been bio majors, neurobiology, whatever. They had learned a lot more than the non-medicine majors had. But at the same time, medical school, it's the great equalizer. So it's the amount of work that you put in, it really reflects in how much you learn. So even though I started out way behind, because I didn't know as much as anybody else did, but I caught up, and so right now, like when we graduate, we're all going to be doctors. MD is an MD, so I don't think, I think that ultimately my decision to major in Asian American Studies and to get my bachelor's degree in it was honestly the best thing that I could have ever done. Because it really got me to go outside of my comfort zone and to explore in college, and that is one thing that I'm truly grateful for. And I think that everything in life happens for a reason, and somebody is watching over me and helping me along the way. So that is something that I will eternally be grateful for, because ultimately you just have to get into medical school. So however much time I put into the project and just having fun with other students on campus and not studying, ultimately it all turned out okay. So I feel that at the end of the day, if you put in the work, it shows. It really shows. So you just have to be really passionate about what you do, and I try to carry that everywhere.
Well, when you got accepted, how old was you?
How
old were you?
When I got accepted, I think I was 20 years old. So right now I am the third youngest person in my medical school class, and the youngest guy, he is 6 months younger than me, so not by much. But even then, it's really difficult just doing as much as you can with that age barrier these days, because everybody, it's a pipeline. Like you have to hit certain milestones when you go through the pipeline, and so I did come in at a disadvantage, but I was proud that I had done so much with so little time. We had the oldest guy in our class, I think he's 47 years old, and he had already done 20 years in the Air Force, and he had worked in an emergency room in the Air Force for a while. So of course coming in, he's consistently been the smartest person in our class. So but to each his own, and I just gotta make sure that I work hard and that I get through medical school. So that way, take care of yourself first, and then you can make sure that you can give back to the community later. So.
Your parents came from, and what did they do for a living?
Well, my father was, he's from Hong Kong, and he grew up extremely poor, just on the streets of Hong Kong. And so, the same story with my mother. She is from Taiwan, and her father actually fought in Chiang Kai-shek's army, and then they got kicked out by the communists. And so my grandfather, my mother's father, he was shot in the leg when they were escaping, and like privates, they didn't make anything, so she never had enough food to put on the table. Either, and education was even worse. Just growing up in the village, there wasn't any education, like compared to the people in the city. Families had a lot of money. They couldn't afford to send their kids to the best prep schools in the nation. But my mom, she really struggled, but she studied as hard as she could, and then she managed to test her way into the best schools in the nation. Just through hard work and sheer willpower. And her mom never believed in her. There were a couple times where like the schools, they required fees or whatever, and then my mom, she didn't have the money, and then her mom didn't want to give her the money either because they didn't have any. So my mom, she ended up borrowing a bunch of money from some of her teachers who really believed in her. And I mean, to this day, like I used to go back to Thailand as a kid, and everybody in the village, they still think of her as like a legend for being able to get her way out of the village and claw her way out. Because I mean, education, it is so vitally important. And my parents, they had, despite having grown up with no money and nothing, they were able to, luckily get into a good university and then come over to the United States. And so, they wanted to give their children the best possible shot that they could. And that was something that I also look up to. My mom's like one of my heroes. So she, just an amazing woman, being able to do so much from having so little. That is something really special, and that it really shows to me how much, by struggling, if you work a little bit harder, then hopefully that hard work will pay off. And so that's something that I've tried to take with me just through college, and then now through medical school. Every time I think about how bad I have it, I just think about how bad my mom had it. And that helps me get through it a little bit easier. So,
by that being said, when you work with the oral history project of the Vietnamese American, you found yourself, your parents in the along the way somehow.
Yeah. So that it's the story of especially the Vietnamese Americans who, despite all odds, having suffered so much throughout the war, and yet able to somehow find their way, especially the ones here, to America, and then to become successful in their own rights. I thought that that was something that was truly great in terms of history, and not a lot of people know about that. And so for me personally, that was also just one of my inspirations, just knowing that I am so fortunate to be born in America with so much freedom and the choice to choose who I want to be, to really make that decision, and to know that you do have that freedom to, if you work hard, like you can really make something special. So that was something that I thought was pretty great. So,
Well, what is your dream in 5-10 years? Of course, you want to be a doctor, and what is it in the life?
For medicine, actually, these days, the system itself has been broken for many years. So in 5 years, I will still actually not be a fully accredited doctor. So at this point, I just need to first graduate from medical school, and then spend a couple of years being a doctor. But then after I'm fully qualified, I would really like to, get more involved in the community. I do see a couple of doctors out there, but in Texas you have 50,000 doctors, and they command so much respect in the community, and yet you don't see them, or many of the doctors, you won't see them out helping on a more public scale. And so that's something that I hope to do, is to get involved on a public scale, because I know that I could do a great job in terms of just knowing the problems and knowing the issues and having seen it. Right now you have a bunch of lawyers who are, they're all elected politicians, and then they're trying to fix the healthcare system, which they don't see every day. And so the doctors, if you see the system every day and you work in it, and then you see the failures and the benefits and everything that's good and everything that's bad, I feel like those are the people that you want to ask to fix the system. And so that is something that I look forward to. I guess, I don't know, maybe in 10 years, 20 years, however on down the line, it's definitely something I want to look into, is not just being a physician, but being a community oriented physician that, you know, is able to get out there and does more than just, you know, see 15 patients a day. I really want to get out there and try to make a change. So that's, I mean, ultimately, I think that, you know, somebody has to do it. So at this point, I feel like I'm in a pretty good position to I guess help out with leadership right now, because we really need it. And you know, this generation, there's a lot that's going on that, you know, we need to address these issues in the future. So hopefully, you know, when I become a doctor and after a while I can still make a living, hopefully. So, you know, just try to take care of everybody first. Make sure that my parents are okay. You know, healthcare these days, it costs, you know, if you have a stroke or something, you know, it costs $10,000 a month to take care of your parents. And so, I mean, I don't have that kind of money. But, you know, I see that in our medical school, some of the doctors, they do that. One of them that I really respect, his wife's parents they both need care. So he actually helps out his wife's parents and he takes care of them. And, you know, I saw that when I first got into medical school, and I was like, hey, I think that's something that, you know, I would want to do, is help out a little bit. And then, you know, right now I'm interested in looking into geriatrics, especially for the Asian American population, because I know that in a couple of years, we'll all have to be taking care of our parents. So that's something that hopefully, you know, it fixes itself. But right now, one step at a time. That's something that I learned in college, is you never know where life takes you. I mean, it was just an odd stroke of the luck that I became an Asian American Studies major, and then, you know, Linda Ho Peche's class. I mean, it's just so many things have to fall into place at the exact right time for everything to happen, that sometimes, you know, you make a plan and watch God laugh. But you know, if you work hard and you have an idea of where you want to go, you can always work towards that. And so with that, I mean, I just try to take life as it comes and not get too stressed out about anything, because at the end of the day, like, plans change and everything changes. But if you have a strong set of core values of knowing who you are and knowing why you're doing what you're doing, I think that's the key to success. So.
The question comes: if you have a choice of $1 million or freedom, you just can take one, okay? What would you choose?
I would take the freedom. I mean, having been born in America, when you do have freedom, you have the opportunity to make your own path in life. And that is by far the most important thing, is not having your will taken away, is being able to choose who you want to be. And so, I mean, having $1 million is pretty cool, but, you know, knowing how to make $1 million yourself is even cooler. So that's, so I would definitely take the freedom. You know, America, I've been able to get so much from this country, and, you know, I mean, this is my home. And I mean, it's been truly amazing what all the gifts that have been given to me, having been born here. I mean, you know, even in China today, like, people are still suffering, and all over the world, people are suffering because they don't have freedom. And, you know, that's something that I am eternally grateful for, is having been born in this nation, so that, you know, I can do as much as I can. And I don't have to overcome the same barriers that my parents had to face, and many of the immigrants in America, they all came here for the same reason, to be able to have freedom. So I think that ultimately that is the most important.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you.
Good luck to you on everything.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for helping the foundation. We appreciate it. I would say that without you, probably the project not go that far, that fast and that far. So thank you again.
Thank you. It was very good.